basically is education and human capital in colonial Lagos. And what do we mean by education? I believe in our HSS 121 class last semester, last session, we have already treated all there is to all that we need to know about the early history of education in Lagos. The introduction of Western education in Lagos are all been treated. Okay, so today, if you give me a second. So as I've said, we're looking at uh, education, and human capital in Lagos. So we will focus on the supply of education in Lagos. All right, we want to look at how education was introduced, the pattern of education that was introduced in Lagos, and what effects, did education have on the development of Lagos. So, in considering education and human capital in colonial Lagos, the first question we should ask is, why did colonial authorities establish schools in Lagos? What were the motivating factor? What were the what were the driving force behind the move to introduce Western education in Lagos? All right, we've noted that by the mid 19th century, growing governance and trade interests required many educated Africans. That is one of the things we noted in our HSS 121 class, that as a result of the growing governance, the colonization of Lagos, and the establishment of colonial public service, bureaucracy, all right, and also the burgeoning, the growing commercial activities in Lagos, actually necessitated that educated Africans should be produced to play one role or the other in the business of colonial capitalism. So educated Africans were needed in public service and were also seen as proto or semi-elite by their counterparts. All right, so their brethren who probably didn't receive education see those who were privileged to have received formal education as belonging to a new class of elite. And but there was a dilemma. They faced a dilemma. So for instance, the supply of education was not with its own challenge, all right, or challenges. Okay. Officials first feared that educated Africans would demand more freedom when met with hard limits to social mobility. So colonial authorities, even though in trying to introduce modernity, in trying to foster enlightenment, in Lagos, just like in other parts of Nigeria subsequently, and even in West Africa, all right, we're quite skeptical about the need, all right, or the essence of Western education that was given to the indigenous people. Officials fear that educated Africans would, as a result of the education they had received, demand more freedom when met with stiff, policies. All right, and especially when they could not enjoy certain social mobility. So, for instance, a statement by the Secretary of State Colonial Office, in Britain during the period was quoted. The high cost per head is a necessary result of our African policy, born of bitter experience in India, a policy of caution and firm foundation, advancing from a few selected and well-equipped centers in slowly widening circles. Secondary education is being restricted with reference to local demand and more urgent claims for primary education. So perhaps the colonial authorities felt that the best they could do in terms of providing Western education was the primary education, which I'm going to portray. All right. So there was limited initiatives with regards to the establishment of secondary schools, because the cardinal imperative of the schools established was to produce a group of African people who will be able to read and write and will be able to contribute, to the growth of colonial activities, either in trading or in colonial bureaucracy and all of that. So we look at the pattern, look at the nature of investment, and we've, of course, in our HSS 121 class, we had already highlighted the contribution of various missionary groups supported by the colonial by the British government in establishing schools. All right, so in this context, we are saying that considerable investments in education were made by colonial authorities, which had no important effect on social mobility and also political engagement. For instance, next week, the topic we'll be looking at is the impact of education on the decolonization process, for instance, in Nigeria, of course, which Lagos played a cardinal role. We'll be looking at the role the role which the education received by the cream of elite, all right, play in engineering them to react against colonial oppression, colonial exploitation, and colonial capitalism. So number two is that I've said that considerable investments in education were made by colonial authorities, which had an important effect on social mobility and political engagement. It helped the people on the one hand, to uh, enhance their social status, and also on the other hand, to uh, have some level of political interactions with the colonial government. They started demanding, making demands and yearnings from the colonial authorities. So Africans also demanded more Western education. All right, with the growth of primary education, as I'm going to demonstrate shortly, came the demand for more secondary education. The few educated class, who had received benefited from the primary education, started requesting or demanding for advanced education, right, which is at the secondary level. Third is that colonial powers also, on their own part, fear that education would, given secondary and even tertiary, that was not even on the table. Providing secondary education to the people would threaten their control, right? It will challenge, it will lead, sometimes to challenge of some colonial policies and colonial, initiatives in Lagos as it was in other places. So it was felt that, since primary education was quite sufficient for people to read and write, all right, to know how to engage themselves in the business of colonial activities, either as clerks or civil servants, or even in agricultural occupation. So primary education increased while secondary education was essentially scarce until the early 20th century. So from what we have done in our HSS 121 class, we have seen how primary education developed rapidly in Lagos, in the 19th century, from 1850s, 1860s, all right, up to 1880s and 1890s particularly, all right. But secondary education was relatively scarce until the 20th century. So we want to look at what are the investments made in educational facilities, educational development in Lagos. Of course, we've noted that education was financed entirely by colonies with no contribution from metropole. That is one of the key points to note. Even though education was encouraged by the colonial authorities, schools were being established, but these schools, apart from majority of the major initiatives made by the Christian missionary groups, most of the schools were financed entirely by colonies with no contributions from metropole or from British government, for instance. So investments also tended to concentrate over time as marginal investment flowed to areas with existing facilities and locally high demand for education, which in turn fueled, which was fueled by earlier investment in education. The point I'm making in this regard is that there was uneven development, all right, even in the distribution of educational facilities, all right. For instance, Lagos as I will read out to you shortly, was the center of gravity, was the center of attraction in the growth of Western education. Right, it was the first city in Nigeria that actually saw an unprecedented increase, an exponential increase in the establishment of primary and secondary schools. All right, so this actually created some uneven development, not just between Lagos and the rest of the southern protectorate, for instance, in the 20th century, but also between the southern protectorate and the northern protectorate. All right, I'm going to show you a few figures before I wrap up the class. So there was also the low level of investment made in education through grant to missionary schools. All right, so there was low level of investment in some of the schools. Colonial authorities probably didn't commit themselves, financially, even though they encourage, in theory, encourage missionary groups to establish schools and engage in social services, promoting education and all of that. But in terms of putting money on the table for the schools to thrive, little investment or low investment were made in education, by the colonial authorities. So in turn, missionary schools were generally run on initiatives of the local people. Right, all right. So for instance, in our HSS 121, we highlighted the contributions of several agencies, right, local agencies in promoting education, including religious institutions. And Sarudin, for instance, all right, we mentioned how the role they played in ensuring that there is a balanced and inclusive representation and development in education. And all of these were because the essence of colonial capitalism was to generate profits rather than promoting development as it were. Okay, so we want to look at a few of the secondary schools or secondary education that was actually introduced in the 20th century, which we already highlighted some of them in our 100 level when we were looking at the introduction of education in Lagos. So I think the first of the most popular among the secondary schools that was established basically was the CMS Grammar School in Bariga, right? Which was in 1859. It was established by CMS Mission, right? And it was basically a typically boys school which was established was the first. So we're looking fundamentally, basically, at secondary. We have considered primary and secondary relatively in our HSS 121, but in this class, we're focusing more on the secondary education introduced by the colonial authorities. We had also the Methodist Boys High School, in Lagos, which was established in 1878 by Methodist Mission, which was also a boys only school in Lagos. And these were some of the, you could see, the point I was making about the role of the missionaries. Even though the colonial authorities were at the front, but they were fronting, uh, the advocacy for Western education. But in terms of committing resources to the growth of the schools, little or no efforts perhaps were made. We had the Baptist Girls High School in Lagos, 1879, all right, which was also a Methodist mission school. We have the Baptist Academy in Lagos, 1885, a mission school, which was a boys only. The Methodist Girls High School was a girls' school, basically. All right, we have St. Andrew's College. We have Hope Waddell Training Institute at Calabar, which was also aimed at promoting agricultural activities. Subsequently, because the colonial government had to spread, they had to ensure that the schools established had regional spread, and everything was not just focused or concentrated on Lagos. So there had to be some improvement, in the introduction of education in other part of the country. But that was the reason why, and that's the reason why we have other schools like Hope Waddell Training Institute in Calabar in 1895, which was established by the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. Okay, we have the St. Andrews College or your in 1896. Can the person mute his or
No, no,
herself?
no. No.
Can that person mute his or herself before we end this class now?
No.
Can that person mute his or herself? So we have the St. Anne's schools at Molete Ibadan. All right, so all of these efforts, while the schools established in Lagos were thriving, it was also important for the some improvements to be recorded in other parts of the country, all right, because it was necessary. The colonial activities had been quite well entrenched in other parts of the country. So Baptist Training School, Domosho was in 1897 by Baptist Mission. All right, we have the Oron Training Institute, which is now the Oron Boys High School, in 1897 by the Presbyterian Church also. The Paul's College, Ivienu in Oka by CMS. We have the Methodist Boys High School in Oron in 1903. All right, we have the Wesleyan College also, Elekuro in Ibadan, which is also by the Methodists. We have the Abeokuta Grammar School in 1908, the King's College in Lagos in 1909, King's College, and we have the St. John's College in Bida, and quite a number of schools. All right, of course, during the period, we have the Queen's College also, quite a number of them, Eko Boys High School, quite a number of secondary school thrive without mentioning the Ahmadiyya and the Ansarudin, which were Islamic schools. All right. So the point I was making is that colonial authorities probably didn't commit themselves, financially to the development of these schools, and that is actually understandable because the cardinal, the modus operandi of colonial capitalism is to generate, to extract revenue, resources from the colonies, not basically to come and develop them. And that reflected in the kind of curriculum that the colonial authorities allowed in the schools established, which we have noted in our 100 level class, which was basically Bible knowledge, all right, reading, writing, arithmetic, and agricultural sciences. All right, people needed to learn how to cultivate cocoa, palm oil, groundnut, and all of that stuff. So the more practical and more rudimentary the education is, the more useful schools will be. And it is a matter of turning young natives into workers who speak and write in English, according to Kamili Guy, a lieutenant governor in Senegal. So you can see this statement, and it represents what the interest of the colonial government was in colonial Lagos and elsewhere in Africa. So their effort is just to get the people to know how to read and write so that they can be able to work effectively in the colonial public service if they were employed, and also to work to be better farmers and to be able to be a conforming Christians, to reading their Bibles and the hymns and all of that. These were some of the So we'll look at what was the nature of the curriculum. All right, so we have the adapted curriculum. All right, what do we mean by adapted curriculum? This adapted curriculum refers to the idea that Black communities required less advanced, more localized education, which was separate from the European education. All right, so it was an abridged kind of, inverted kind of curriculum that was encouraged because the colonial authorities would not want the indigenous people to measure up, to the standard of the, Europeans, right? So adapted curriculum was the form, introduced in Black communities, which required less, more localized education. I've told you about the need for people to, the T.F. Boston's principle of the Bible and the plow. On the one hand, they were given the Bible, on the left hand, they were given the plow. All right, so the Bible, the reading of the Bible will produce citizens, all right, subject, colonial subject that will conform to the initiatives of the colonial government, whether in agricultural practice. And this was understandable. You could understand the reason why many people obeyed the colonial government when it was time for people to switch in from their basic agricultural activities of local food crops into cash crops. All right, because once you have been given the Bible, you don't have to. There are clauses in the Bible that says you should not, you should obey your government, you should not disobey constituted authorities and all of that. Blessed are the peacemaker, blessed are you thou when thou art persecuted, and blessed are the oppressed, and all of those kind of stuffs in the Beatitude. All right. So we also had there was also the the fact that the British colonies gave grant to private missionary schools rather than investing in public education. So grants in most British colonies, especially in Lagos, the government gave grant to private missionary schools rather than investing in public education. So it was only the few private missionary schools, private missionary schools that were supported, not the public schools basically in Lagos, and that was the situation in other parts of British West Africa. So grants were also based on mission schools providing vocational training alone. I've told you that the interest of the British was to expand the production of cash crops from which revenues will be derived. If you have read the works of Emmanuel Wallerstein, and quite a number of dependency scholars who actually argue that the business of colonial capitalism was to extract capital from the colonies to the metropole, all right, creating a dependent economic system, all right, whereby so they needed the colonial subject to produce large agricultural produce, all right, and to do that, education had to be provided for the people. Agricultural trainings must be given to the people to increase the agricultural productivity. And this was the kind of programs the colonial government supported. Grants given to the missionaries were contingent on the mission schools providing vocational training alone, whether in agriculture or other vocational activities. So in practice, those students spent most of their days in indentured labor with no real education, going on in school, farm training, farm agricultural training, and perhaps maybe some vocational training, sewing, for instance, for the girls. These were some of the stuff promoted by the colonial authorities. So I can just show you a few some of the activities that are reflected in the curriculum, all right, in the schools established in Lagos and even in the larger part of Nigeria and even West Africa in the 20th century. So there were obligatory subject for boys and there were also obligatory subject for girls. For instance, the colloquial English and nurture study, all right. This was we have the reading with translation into vernacular, you know, meaning of words and simple grammar, same as boys. So these were particularly taught. These are some of the subjects that the boys learned in schools. All right, while you have arithmetic, also for the boys, arithmetic, and you have hygiene and sanitation for also the boys and girls, hygiene and so to of what significance, some of these, focus thematic focus, with regards to the existential development, of the people, of the time. So there was also the manual training to include drawing or shorthand, typing. Of course, the colonial authorities needed people who would be able to perform these activities, in the colonial civil service. You need people who use the typewriter, right, to document and to, produce, correspondences, type messages, and all of that, keep records and this. So this, was to help, especially in the domestic economy, all right, and also, also help. Of course, if you have read the works of scholars like E. Ayondele, the emergence of the public letter writers in Lagos, of course, this aspect of the curriculum helped, in producing, the semi-letter writers in colonial Lagos. There was also moral instruction in the curriculum for boys, and there were the optional subjects, were history and geography, and you have singing, all right, how to sing hymns in church and all of that. Then you have drill and physical exercise, kinetics and human kinetics, and so for me, this is basically all nonsense. Basically, which these are issues, even though as they are relevant, but they had no tangible, impact on the socio-economic development of the people of Lagos. So what? Let's look at the impact. What were the major impact of the educational facilities or programs introduced in the 20th century by the colonial authorities? So the first is that the culture of elitist colonial education of the 19th century and the early 20th century gave way to a populist one starting from the 1920s, as the colonialist new interest in Western education increased school enrollment. So basically, the fact that many schools in Lagos had produced a large number of primary, educated people, all right, led to the enrollment of many, at the secondary level by, the early 20th century. So we have all the large people who had received primary education, found their ways into the secondary schools, beginning from the 20th century. So the number, and this reflected, in the regional disparity also, which I'm going to highlight subsequently. The number of Southern Nigerians who had completed post-secondary schools education jumped astronomically, from 200 in the early 1920s to 31,000 in the early 1950s. Lagos had the larger share of school enrollment, secondary school enrollment during this period, and the primary school enrollment of 1.1 million in the 1950s was in stark contrast to the 140,000 140 thousand people years late before. So by independence, 20% of schools in Nigeria were in Lagos. For you to see the remarkable improvement, especially kudos to the credit goes to the missionary schools, right? Not basically the colonial government. So 20% of schools in Nigeria were already in Lagos, and this expansion in literacy in English produced two complementary outcomes. Basically, on the one hand, it increased newspaper readership, all right, and sales, all right, the printing press, printing activities, publishing of newspapers and all of that increased as people became so fascinated to reading daily newspapers. There were quite a number of them that grew and developed in Lagos. While on the other hand, it also produced or provided opportunities for Nigerians to express their own ideas about living in a colonial society. So for the first time, in the 20th century, people were not just docile about the exploitation of colonial activities. People started reacting because education, yeah, no matter how bad or deficient it was, it empowered the indigenous people, the local people, to be able to challenge some of the initiatives and policies and programs of the colonial government. So the content, and the readership of newspaper, actually provoked, political engagement and in various dimensions. So issues around constitutional reforms, actually, were targeted at leading elites and nationalists. Many people got involved in debate about the question of constitutionalism, which you look at, the rule of law, all right, representation, and the question of diversity and inclusion. All of these were issues that were the front burner as a result of the impact of education. I spoke about political engagement the other time, apart from social mobility. So this education provoked political engagement. What actually fueled the colonial process? We've talked about last week. We considered the role played by prominent political figures like Abat Macaulay, for instance. All right, and quite a number of them who were Nnamdi Azikiwe, and quite of them which we mentioned last week. So let me summarize the impact of colonial secondary education in Lagos. All right, one is it provided stimulated social mobility. It stimulated social mobility in Lagos. All right, it stimulated social mobility and political engagement. Those who had access to Western education had significant intergenerational impact. Right? They were able to transfer this idea to their people. Okay? So the impact of the Western education provoked social mobility and promoted political engagement. Those who had access to Western education had significant intergenerational impact. As I've said, two is that in the area it was in the area of inequalities. All right, there were big disparities in access to education based on region, gender, religion. I've told you earlier, for instance, in the context of religion, most of the schools that were established in Lagos were basically Christian missionary schools. All right, so there was this disparities, and the supposed marginalization of the Muslim, population in Lagos, because colonial authorities, tended to, cling or supported the Western Christian schools. All right, and this actually, led to a number of debates, which was the reason why by 1920s and 30s we have Lagos recorded several establishments of Islamic schools like the Narawuddin and Sarudin Ahmadiyya schools and all of the stuffs. So third is the empowerment. All right, so these disparities have tended to persist into colonial times, creating a post-colonial period, creating intelligentias and political elites. All right, it was the educational initiatives of the colonial government that actually led to the empowerment. Those who played one role or the other in the newly emerged political systems in 1960 were product of the colonial educational system. So the legacy of colonial educational systems in terms of human capital was quite profound. That's what I'm trying to say. All right. So individuals who were part of the first two cohorts to receive education at colonial schools in Lagos, for instance, had no higher living standard and better social network compared to the farmers, the uneducated individuals. All right, so this in terms of social mobility. Many of those people who were privileged to receive education and they became they joined the cream of elites in Lagos society, at independence. Even during the colonial period, they were the elites. All right, the Kofo Bayomi, the Obasa Chalote, all right, the daughter of R.B. Blaze, all right, and all of this, Enrica, all right, Nnamdi Azikiwe, all right, if you like, Kofo Bayomi, and all of these, about Macaulay, even traditional elites, there were people who benefited, even, and it played out in at independence. The people who dominated the political, landscape, basically were those who had received education from the colonial system. So the educated individuals were also much less likely to be farmers, all right, and much likely to be politically active. So these educated people hardly ventured into the realm of agriculture or no, no vocational activities. They were all involved in political permutations in the newly emerged Nigerian state, all right, at independence. So most of this young education, most educated young people had moved to big cities. Subsequently, some of them traveled abroad to acquire further education and again return to gain salary jobs. All right, in the colonial, a typical example that I'm going to demonstrate, the Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and quite a number of them. So very few will return home to become farmers or, of course, not only because agricultural work during this period was less than the government. It had government work had more prestige. all right, than agricultural jobs, all right, because and many people also wanted to live in the urban centers rather than stay in the rural areas because of the political economy of the time. So inequalities in terms of regional inequalities, which I spoke about, localities that had higher level of public investments in the early colonial period, continue to have higher level of investments in later periods, leading to better outcomes even to the present day. Now, this explains the reason you have in northern parts of Nigeria today, you have high level, large number of out of school children. All right, I think the last time I checked, it was Nigeria had about 19 million people out of school children. A significant proportion of those out of school children are in the north. So it was perhaps this was some of the legacy of Colonial, the uneven uh, initiatives, all right, in terms of educational facilities. While some areas received large concentrations of schools, primary and secondary schools, some areas, of course, due to indigenous culture and the attitude of the people, local people and the elites, to Western education. You could see that even up to the recent period, in the northern part of Nigeria, the idea of education is still being considered as an haram, and that was the philosophy behind the Boko Haram phenomenon. So it probably suggests that at this earlier phase of development of education, the northern part of Nigeria, some areas were not quite receptive, all right, to the idea of establishing schools and bringing the kids, all right, taking them out of the farms and enrolling them in schools. And this actually, for instance, these regional disparities, will play out from colonial to post-colonial. In 19, for instance, 14, in 1914, for instance, northern Nigeria had 8 primary schools, 2 technical government schools, and we have 512 pupils totally in northern Nigeria in 1914, while southern Nigeria had 541 primary schools, out of which 487 mission schools. We have 65,000 total pupils, according to annual report of the colonies. In 1952, school enrollment in Nigeria, for instance, amounted to 900,000, all right, and later moved to 2.35 million, all right, in Nigeria. And the disparity, the large number of these people who are in school were concentrated in southern Nigeria and in Lagos, particular. So the demand of education continue to grow in the southern provinces, especially in Lagos. Despite severe restriction on supply, the colonial group saw education as a source of empowerment and demanded more of it. And it was this demand that led to the proliferation of more schools and also to the establishment of tertiary schools, tertiary education. Because even though many secondary schools have been established from the 1920s, 30s, the colonial groups, the educated elites, would not be satisfied with the number of secondary schools that was on ground. They needed more tertiary educations rather than people traveling after their secondary school to England and America to receive university education or tertiary education. So the people started demanding for the establishment of uh, universities and polytechnics. And it was under this guise that the Yaba College of Education, Yaba College of Technology was established in 1934. Right? And following series of political engagement, also the agitations and yearnings by the educated class, including the Nigerian Youth Movement, which was derivation of the West African Students Union. All right, it was due to quite a number of pressure, they mounted on the government that the first university, all right, in Nigeria actually emerged, the University College Ibadan, which later became known as the University of Ibadan. It was established in 1948, and subsequently, by 1960, through several commissions of inquiries. Other universities were established. For instance, the University of Lagos also came into being in 1962, along with other regional universities like the Ahmadu Bello University, you have the Obafemi Awolowo University, the University of Nigeria in Suka, and all of these were some of the initiatives that followed the agitations of the educated elite, and it was well captured. The improvement in educational development was well captured by a colonial official. When he wrote in 1973. All right, the document records was kept in 1919, and I want to read. Never in the course of my experience in the tropics have I found a place where the people were so avid for education. It is the only country I fancy where the schoolboy, without being a prig, is more anxious to go to school than his parents are to send him. So this, you could see that, so education, even the young people, in the Lagos society or Nigerian society were eager, were anxious, to go to school because of the promise, which education actually offered. So, and I mentioned the names of a few people like Nnamdi Azikiwe, for instance, who through the education he had received, was able to play a pivotal role in the political configuration of the Nigerian state. Nnamdi Azikiwe, after completing his primary and secondary education in Nigeria, moved to the US for graduate school, graduate education, and attained a faculty position at Lincoln. He became a lecturer at Lincoln University. You could see the social mobility, and subsequently he served as the first president of Nigeria and propagated evolutionary vision on decolonized education. All right. So he noted that the African is not and never has been a problem. There is no such thing as an African educational problem. Those who believe in such an oddity are the problems in themselves. That was Azikiwe in 1934. All right. So you could see. So he was recorded to have made other by several strides, including establishing one of the most prominent newspaper printing press. Right, his paper was quite popular. His daily writings in colonial Lagos and post-colonial was quite influential in the decolonial struggle against colonial capitalism. Azikiwe also stressed that technical and vocational training should be emphasized to the extent that Africans are educated as human beings and not as museum specimen, or fossil or preserved animals for scientific experimentation. These are the kind of thoughts of people we should admire. All right, if you come to my office, you see some of this picture. I have Nnamdi Azikiwe's picture there, and this is quite very, very fascinating each time I look at some of these writings and the graphics. So, I've mentioned that education led to the emergence of indigenous political elites, all right, who control power, and rather than help create a collaborative local elite, education empowered African nationalist leader. Educated Africans went on to lead anti-colonial movements, the Pan-African movement, and link their struggles to the international socialist movement in Lagos. We had quite a number of names to look at. Nkrumah, also in other part of West Africa, Kwame Nkrumah also played a pivotal role in Ghana, in Yoriri, also in his own country. All of these guys were people who received primary educations in their own countries, went abroad to school, and shaped political process, political engagement, and the process of state formation in their own countries. And I need to mention the role played by Obafemi Awolowo, who was a pioneer of the free primary education in Nigeria. All right, these are some of the elites who also use their intellectual capital in advancing the cause of free education in Lagos and also in Nigeria. Basically, in Lagos, for instance, as with Southwest Nigeria, satisfaction with missionary education ultimately led to the institution of the free primary education scheme, FPE, in the 1950s. So this started in Lagos, and it was through the initiative of the the late Premier Chief Obafemi Awolowo. All right, this was the biggest expansion of education in colonial Africa, where nearly doubling the number of primary schools in the region between 1952 and 1954 through the initiatives, through the innovation brought by Obafemi Awolowo. The number of secondary school and primary schools increased astronomically in Lagos, and the result was quite remarkable. It was phenomenal. Over 50% of children between the ages of 6 and 12 years were beneficiaries of the pre-primary education in the 1950s. And this was quite remarkable. The pre-primary education provided also a wider base for entrance into secondary schools, into trade schools, teachers training college, which quickened the pace of the development of the middle level manpower in Nigeria. And it was something that cannot be jettisoned. In contrast to 1954, when 1 out of 5 pupils in primary school was a girl, by 1966, almost 2 out of 5 were girls. You can see that. So the free primary education initiative of the Obafemi Awolowo also brought about inclusion, and represented gender balance in educational development in Lagos. Overall, the FP created positive spillover for the labor market of the economy. And it was on this basis that Nigeria achieved rapid economic growth at independence. The intellectual capital was quite phenomenal. The injection of government funding of education, primary and secondary, was actually remarkable also. And the key takeaway is that in places where education was available, it became a source of empowerment for the local people, especially in Lagos. All right, you can see when we speak about the modernity of Lagos, the emergence of Lagos as the political and social center of modernity. It is not. This was not a recent phenomenon. So the initiatives and schemes and programs, had been on ground since the colonial period, and some factors and actors, personalities played some role in engineering this social change in Lagos. Basically, the fact is that uh, Africans, especially Lagosians, who received education in colonial Lagos, contributed tremendously to the advancement of socio-economic development of Lagos and Nigeria at large. Thank you very much. Any question, please? Do you have any question?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, please.
Okay, sir, in the impact of Western education, you mentioned that the culture of elitists gave way to a public on the early 20th century. And then you mentioned the increase of secondary school enrollment in the 1950s. You mentioned that it was 200 to about 31,000, and it became 31,000 in 1950s. So, in what year, what was the decade when it was 200? I did not get that part.
Okay, I'll try to upload the I recorded the stuff, all right, on my own phone. I think I also recorded it on the YouTube. So I'll try to upload it on my channel so that you can listen and listen and listen again. All right. So
Yes, sir.
I mentioned indeed that the number of schools, all right, students, in the early 20s was around 200 pupils, but by 1930s thereabout it jumped astronomically. All right, okay, so this is an undeniable fact. So as you read, all right, through the literature, so you also need to look at the regional disparity, all right, in these educational facilities. All right, look at the number of schools in Lagos compared to the other places in southern Nigeria and in northern Nigeria. Okay, any other person?
Yes.
Any other question?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, please.
So last week you changed our topic to the Sahel communities in Lagos State, and we've made our findings, and we found out that now they are scattered like across Lagos, but
I
like
change it. I change it to what?
Sahel communities in Lagos.
Okay.
From colonialism in the 1900s to Sahel communities in Lagos. So now we've made our findings, and then we found out that right now they are scattered across Lagos, but then in the 1900s they were mainly focused in Lagos Island and Mushi. So I want to ask that can you like give us specific places to go because of our safety, to, like for us to interview the people there?
Okay. There are quite a number of. If you need to go to Lagos Island. You need to go
Okay,
to Surulere. So of course, gentrification and urbanization is affecting. But if you go to Lagos Island, there are quite a number of families. All right, you need to just be able to. So when, for instance, Rose Vival, the guy who contested for the governor of Lagos State in last election, 2023,
okay.
no,
Yes,
is
sir.
the member. No, they are the returning slaves. They were known as the Saru, for instance. So if you go
Okay,
to Yaba, I will speak to a professor who knows much about their Professor Lukoju. Okay, you can
okay.
come to school
Yes, sir.
and try and reach out to Professor Lukoju. All right,
Okay, sir.
all right, who
Thank you,
will
sir.
tell you where their location is. All right, no,
Okay,
the
sir.
but if you go to Lagos Island, there are quite a number of by their names you even know them. All right, no,
Okay,
you get the Bears, most of these, Felipe, this Desmond Elliot, for instance, all right, the parents
okay,
are part of the Saro, returning slaves and all of these stuffs. You can
okay.
see, so you can
Thank
see
you.
Professor Ayodeji Lukoju. There are a number of people who can, direct you. Professor Yomi Akinyeye, our department can tell you, ask him about how you can locate a few no, if you one of two or three families is enough to interview. All right.
Okay, thank
No.
you very much.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Pierce.
Okay. So, please, you mentioned some topics earlier that was used to teach some topics in the curriculum. I'd like to know where we can access this curriculum.
Where you can access them.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there are history books. There are books on Lagos history. You have to read. Well, I don't know if I checked my shelf. I think Mobi has written about that. You need to read about uh, K. Whiteman, Lagos, City of Imagination. There are books here and there, but maybe when you come, if you have time to check my office, I can check my shelves. But I'm not your library. You should go to the library. Do you understand? But I can afford to check for the sake of doing that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So, are there any other question? All right. So, as I've said, as I've mentioned, so let's make every effort to plan towards the program. All right. The DSA has requested that everybody fill the form, all right, and attach the picture of their guardian or the parent and signature that they will be attending the excursion. And liaise whatever the course asked you to do, you should do so that you have to plan ahead of the time. And I want everybody to behave decently about the discussion. I do not want any rancor about the excursion. No, any unnecessary debate should be discouraged. Chair Mosolani Deborah.
Good morning, sir. Sir, please, my question is about the form that we're to fill. Some of us are not in Lagos. When should we submit the form? Like, when is the deadline for the submission?
Maybe in 1 week or two, the form should be submitted because it has to be sent to the DSS office. the course rep will come and scan it and put it on your platform. So you print it from where you are and find a way to submit it to the course rep. Okay? Have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, we can just end the class now. Thank you. No other question? All right, thank you. I'll see you next week. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, sir.
Right.